I'm Alexis Vaughn. 19 and family dinners in our Austin home were supposed to be about sharing the day, not shattering everything I trusted. But that night, as we sat around the table with plates of barbecue still steaming, my world cracked open. Mom's face turned pale when her daughter slipped me a notebook under the table, her hands trembling like she was handing over a bomb. I flipped through the pages, my stomach twisting at the scribbled entries, dates, amounts, and notes that screamed betrayal. This wasn't just a random ledger. It proved they'd stolen my college tuition to cover shady debts from Mom's endless gambling sprees, the money I'd counted on for my art classes at the University of Texas, gone to feed her addiction to online slots and backroom deals with dangerous lenders. My fork clattered to the plate. I slammed the table, pointed straight at her, and said, "Give it back, or lose everything." The room froze. Her eyes widened in panic, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she stammered excuses about family sacrifices and how I needed to step up, maybe find a well-off partner to bail us out. The words hit like knives, turning our home into a battlefield. What happened next exposed lies that ran deeper than I imagined, pulling in threats from shadowy figures and forcing me to fight for my future in ways I never expected. If you've ever uncovered a family secret that changed everything, drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you handled it. Smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss how this unfolded. You won't believe the twists. I stormed out of the house and jumped into my car, my heart pounding as I peeled out of the driveway. The streets of our Austin suburb blurred past as I gripped the steering wheel, trying to process the betrayal staring back at me from that notebook. I couldn't think straight. So I pulled over at a gas station a few miles away and dialed Travis, my fingers fumbling on the phone. He picked up on the second ring, his voice calm but concerned. "Alexis, what's wrong? You sound upset." I took a deep breath and spilled everything: the notebook's entries showing Mom's gambling losses, the withdrawals from my tuition fund matching those shady payments. Travis went silent for a moment, then sighed heavily. I knew something like this might happen. It's the same crap she pulled on me a few years back. He explained how, when he started his engineering program, Mom had called him with a similar story: sudden debts from her online betting habits, vague mentions of dangerous lenders breathing down her neck. She'd even suggested he drop out and find a high-paying job or marry into money to help cover it. Too proud to do that. Travis had quit school temporarily, worked double shifts as a welder in an Austin factory, breathing in fumes and scorching his hands to save up. It took him years to get back on track and finish his degree in software engineering. "I didn't tell you because I hoped she'd stopped," he said, his tone bitter. "Dad always covered for her, saying it was just a phase. But those lenders aren't joking. They're the kind who show up at your door if payments slip." My mind raced. The notebook listed thousands gone: $30,000 meant for my art supplies, classes, and dorm at the University of Texas, gone to feed her addiction to online slots and backroom deals with dangerous lenders. Travis asked if Whitney had said anything else when she handed it over. I told him she'd whispered about finding it hidden in Mom's dresser while looking for laundry money, her eyes wide with fear. We talked for an hour as I sat in the parking lot, the Texas sun setting over the strip malls. Travis laid out a plan first. Document everything. He'd come over tomorrow with his laptop to scan the notebook and match it to bank records he'd quietly pulled last year when he suspected Mom's habits were flaring up again. "We can't confront them yet," he said. "We need proof that's ironclad. I'll show you how to record calls without them knowing there's an app for that." He mentioned a contact from his old legal internship, Detective Keith Donovan, who specialized in financial crimes and shady lending rings. "He's helped bust a few operations around Austin," Travis explained. "Those lenders prey on people like Mom, offering quick cash for bets, but with interest that spirals out of control. Keith can guide us on getting subpoenas if needed. I agreed, feeling a spark of hope amid the anger. We decided I'd act normal for now. Pretend I was considering Mom's ridiculous suggestion about finding a rich partner from the business school crowd at UT. As we hung up, Travis promised to pick up Whitney from school tomorrow so she could fill in more details safely. "She's brave for giving you that notebook," he said. "But we have to protect her too. Those lenders don't play fair if they think families turning on each other." I hung up, staring at the notebook on the passenger seat. For the first time, I saw a way out, not just escaping the house, but fighting back with facts and the law. Tomorrow, we'd start building our case, step by step, in the quiet of his apartment downtown, back at my dorm near the University of Texas campus. I couldn't sleep. The notebook's pages kept replaying in my head, entries like 5,000 to cover last week's losses, dated right before my tuition payment bounced. I texted Travis a photo of one page, and he replied immediately, "That's our smoking gun. Get some rest, we're turning this around." I opened my laptop and started noting every withdrawal I remembered from my statements, cross-referencing with the dates. It was tedious, but it kept my mind off the pit in my stomach. The next morning, Travis pulled up in his truck outside my dorm. We drove to a coffee shop near the Colorado River in central Austin, away from prying eyes. Whitney met us there after school, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked nervous but determined. "I saw Mom hiding it last week," she whispered. "She was crying on the phone about needing more money." Travis nodded, pulling out his scanner. We digitized every page. Then he showed me how to use a discreet recording app on my phone. "Next time Mom calls about helping the family, hit record. We need her admitting the debts on tape." He called Keith Donovan from the table, putting him on speaker. Keith's voice was steady, professional. "Sounds like a classic case of predatory lending mixed with addiction. Send me the scans, I'll advise on next steps. Like getting a subpoena for bank records." We spent the afternoon mapping it out. I'd go home acting like nothing happened, probe Mom for more details while recording. Travis would handle the legal side, and Whitney would keep an eye out for any new hiding spots. Casey, Travis's girlfriend from work, offered her place as a backup if things got heated. By evening, we had a solid plan. As I drove back to the suburb, the Austin skyline fading behind me, I felt less like a victim and more like someone taking control. The notebook was locked in my glove compartment. Our first piece of real leverage. Whitney texted me later, "Be careful, Mom's acting weird." I replied with a thumbs up, knowing we were just getting started. The next day, I headed back home. I slipped into the house quietly, my phone ready in my pocket. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring coffee like nothing had happened. She looked up and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Alexis, good you're here. We need to talk about helping with the family situation." I nodded, hitting the record button discreetly as she sat me down. She leaned in, her voice low. "Those debts aren't going away. You could meet someone from the business crowd at UT, someone with money who could support us all. Dress nice, laugh at their stories, and don't push back if things get complicated. It's just temporary, until we stabilize." I played along, asking questions to draw her out. "What if I can't find someone fast enough?" She hesitated, then admitted the lenders were pressing hard, mentioning calls from a guy named Dominic who expected payment soon. "He's not patient," she said, her fingers twisting the mug. "If we miss more, it'll affect everyone. You have a good look, use it to connect with the right people." The words made my skin crawl, but I kept calm, getting her to spell out the plan on tape. She even suggested specific spots on campus where wealthy guys hung out, like the student union during lunch rushes. After she finished, I excused myself and texted Whitney to meet me in her room. She snuck in, closing the door softly. "I found something else," she whispered, pulling out Mom's old phone from her backpack. She left it charging last night. Look at this app, it's tracking something. We opened it, and there was a log of locations, times, and even messages about payments. One entry showed a pin at my dorm near the University of Texas campus, time-stamped from yesterday. "She's been monitoring you," Whitney said, her voice shaking. We screenshot everything, realizing it tied directly to the lender's demands. Travis called later, confirming the app data matched patterns from shady lending services he'd researched. "Send it over, we'll add it to the file." He arranged for me to meet Dominic the next afternoon, saying Keith had cleared it as long as I wore a wire. "Stay in public," Travis warned. "The coffee shop in central Austin, near the river, lots of people around." I arrived early at the spot, the bustle of downtown Austin providing some cover. People chatted over lattes, unaware of the knot in my stomach. Dominic showed up on time. A middle-aged guy in casual slacks and a button-down, looking like any businessman. He shook my hand firmly and ordered an espresso before sitting across from me. "Your mom's in deep," he started, his tone matter-of-fact. "Those bets added up fast. We need consistent payments, or things get uncomfortable for families." I pretended interest, asking about the total owed. He pulled out a small pad, listing figures that matched the notebook's entries. $30,000 funneled through back channels. "Smart girls like you can help rearrange terms," he said with a smirk. "Find the right connections, and we might adjust the interest." When I pressed for details, he leaned closer. "Accidents happen when folks ignore warnings. Better to handle this privately, no courts involved." His words weren't outright threats, but the implication hung heavy. I nodded, keeping the conversation going until he finished his coffee and left with a nod. Back at the dorm, I uploaded the recording to Travis. He forwarded it to Keith, who replied quickly, "Solid evidence of coercion. We'll build on this." Meanwhile, Whitney sent more screenshots from the app, showing another tracking attempt that morning. Travis introduced me to Donna Greer over email, the financial aid specialist at the University of Texas who'd handled emergency cases before. "She's discreet," he said. "Send her the basics, no details on the lenders yet." Donna responded that evening, scheduling a meeting for tomorrow. "Bring any proof of hardship," she wrote. I gathered my bank statements, cross-checking them against the notebook and app logs. The patterns were clear, Mom's withdrawals timed with her betting spikes. Keith called to walk me through the wire setup for future talks. "Clip it inside your collar," he instructed. "Test it before any call." He demonstrated over video, emphasizing how to stay natural. That night, Mom texted about family options, but I ignored it, focusing on the plan. Whitney slipped me a note under my door, found her password log, more proof inside. We met in the backyard, away from ears, and she handed over scribbled codes that unlocked more debt emails. It was building fast, each piece strengthening our case against the mess Mom had created. A few days later, the threats escalated. I got a frantic call from Travis while walking to class. "Check your phone, someone slashed all 4 tires on my truck last night." He sent photos, deep gashes in the rubber, and a note tucked under the wiper reading, "Family handles family business." My pulse raced as I stared at the screen, the busy University of Texas quad suddenly feeling exposed. Travis said he'd already reported it to Keith, who linked it to witness intimidation from the lenders. Keith arrived at my dorm within the hour, his face grim. He explained we needed to move fast, those shady creditors were escalating to scare us off. "You're not safe here," he said. Travis suggested Casey's apartment on the other side of Austin, a quiet spot near downtown where she lived alone. We packed essentials quickly, and Keith drove us there in an unmarked car, checking mirrors the whole way. Casey's place was small but secure. with deadbolts on every door and windows overlooking a busy street. Once settled, Keith set up a secure line for calls and explained the next step, a subpoena for bank records. "The notebook and app logs give us probable cause," he said, typing up the request on his laptop. We'd target the local branch where Mom had withdrawn funds, pulling transaction history to match the debts. Travis handled the paperwork, his engineering precision making the forms airtight. Whitney texted updates from home, saying Mom was pacing and making hushed calls, nothing new. But it confirmed the pressure was building. Keith coached me on safety protocols, vary routes to class, avoid isolated spots, and report any odd cars. "These lenders rely on fear," he noted, "but with the tire incident documented, it's evidence against them." We spent the afternoon reviewing the subpoena draft, ensuring it covered every withdrawal date from the notebook. Donna emailed that afternoon with preliminary aid forms, but she needed the official records to push it through. The following morning, Keith filed the subpoena at the courthouse in central Austin. We waited in a nearby park, the Texas heat bearing down as he returned with confirmation. "It'll take a day or two for the bank to comply," he said. In the meantime, Travis dug into public records on his laptop, finding liens on the house that hinted at Mom's deeper troubles. Casey brought takeout that evening, her steady presence calming us as we pored over the data. Whitney snuck out to meet us at a library branch near her school, handing over a USB drive with more screenshots from Mom's phone. "She mentioned Dominic again last night," she whispered. Keith nodded, adding it to the file. The subpoena came through faster than expected. Bank statements arrived via secure email, showing transfers to untraceable accounts that aligned perfectly with the lender's demands. One line item even noted payment to D Associates, tying directly to Dominic. With the documents in hand, Keith outlined the escalation. "This strengthens our case for protective orders." Travis coordinated with Donna, forwarding redacted versions for the aid application. She called back excited. "This qualifies you for emergency funds, I'll expedite it." As we wrapped up the day, Keith stationed an undercover officer nearby for watch. The apartment felt like a fortress, but the knowledge that we had concrete proof shifted something inside me. We weren't just reacting anymore. That night, another text came from an unknown number. "Wrong move, debts don't disappear." I showed Keith, who traced it immediately. "They're slipping," he said. We used the conversation to prepare statements, detailing every interaction. Casey helped organize the files, her questions sharpening our focus. By the end of the week, the subpoena had unlocked more email trails from the bank confirming suspicious activity flagged months ago, but ignored. The pieces were falling into place, each revelation hardening my resolve. Whitney stayed over one night, her small bag packed with essentials, whispering about Dad's growing silence at home. "He's starting to crack," she said. Travis promised we'd protect her too. As I lay awake, the city lights filtering through the blinds, I knew the confrontation was coming, but now we had the upper hand. The following week, we pushed forward. Keith set up a full briefing at Casey's apartment, bringing equipment for the second recording. He clipped a new wire to my shirt, smaller than the first, and tested it with a mock conversation. "This one's higher quality, court ready," he said. The goal was to get Dominic talking about specific enforcement methods, building on the bank data we'd secured. Travis reviewed the questions with me, phrasing them to sound naive but probing. "Ask about what happens if payments stop," he suggested. Whitney listened in, adding details from overhearing Mom's recent calls. I arranged the meet through a burner number Keith provided, setting it at a different coffee shop in East Austin, one with outdoor seating for better surveillance. Dominic agreed quickly, his text curt. On the day, Keith positioned 2 undercover officers nearby, one as a jogger, another at a table with a laptop. I arrived first, ordering tea to steady my nerves. Dominic slid into the seat across from me, scanning the area before speaking. "Progress on your family's end?" he asked, sipping black coffee. I handed over a small envelope with cash from Keith's fund, pretending it was a partial payment. "What's the full timeline for clearing this?" I questioned. He pocketed it without counting. "Depends on cooperation, missed deadlines, and we have ways to encourage it visits, reminders that stick." When I pressed for examples, he described scenarios of property damage or job interference, always skirting direct admissions but implying enough. "Courts are slow, our methods are efficient," he added with a cold smile. The wire captured every word, including his mention of past accidents with non-payers. After he left, Keith debriefed me in the car. "That's gold for charges clear, intent to intimidate." Back at the apartment, we transcribed the audio, matching phrases to legal definitions of coercion. Donna called with updates on the aid package. "The subpoena records sealed it. Your application's approved for partial coverage," she confirmed. But to finalize, we needed court backing to freeze assets. Travis drafted the petition for a temporary order, listing the stolen tuition as embezzlement. Keith reviewed it, adding affidavits from the recordings. "We'll file tomorrow at the federal courthouse downtown," he said. Whitney contributed by recalling Mom's late-night arguments with Dad about the debts, noting dates that aligned with new withdrawals. Casey helped organize the evidence folders, her calm efficiency keeping us focused. The filing went smoothly the next morning. Keith knew the clerk, speeding things along. The judge granted an emergency hearing for the following day. Citing the intimidation evidence, we spent the afternoon preparing testimony, me on the tuition loss, Travis on the family pattern, even Whitney's observations as a minor witness. Donna sent confirmation docs for the aid, tying it to the case number. At the hearing in the Austin Federal Building, Keith presented the recordings and bank matches. The judge questioned details but nodded at the coercion angle. She issued the freeze on my parents' accounts and house, preventing any sales until resolution. Brenda called frantically afterward, but I let it go to voicemail, recording her pleas about lenders closing in. Keith used it as supplemental evidence. Donna met me at her office on campus later, walking through the payment plan. "With the freeze, you'll get restitution eventually, enough for full semesters ahead." She printed the forms, and I signed, feeling the weight lift slightly. Travis coordinated with a lawyer friend for the civil suit, prepping interrogatories for Brenda and Randall. Whitney stayed with us more often, her school bag becoming a fixture. She shared a hidden email chain from Mom's laptop, showing direct lender communications. Keith added it to the docket. As the week ended, the case file grew thicker, each edition solidifying our position. The lender's silence felt ominous, but with the court's backing, we were ready for whatever came next. The next morning, we faced the courtroom. The federal courthouse in downtown Austin loomed large, its glass facade reflecting the Texas sun. Inside, the air was cold, the benches hard as we sat waiting. Keith adjusted his tie, laying out our evidence, the notebook Whitney found. Bank statements from the subpoena, recordings of Dominic's veiled threats, and Mom's own words about pushing me toward a rich partner. Travis handed the clerk our affidavits, his jaw tight with focus. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes, called the case. I stood beside Travis, my hands steady despite the nerves. Keith presented first, playing the audio of Dominic describing reminders that stick for missed payments. He pointed to ledger entries, $30,000 siphoned from my tuition to cover Mom's gambling debts. The bank records sealed it, showing transfers to accounts linked to Dominic's operation. Whitney's screenshots of Mom's payment app were submitted too, each date matching a withdrawal. Mom sat across the room, her face pale again, avoiding my gaze. Dad was beside her, his shoulders slumped. Their lawyer argued they were desperate, not malicious. But the judge cut him off. "This is theft. Plain and simple," she said, her voice firm. She questioned Mom directly about the notebook. Brenda stammered, admitting she tracked the debts to manage the situation. Dad stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. Keith pushed for a no-contact order against Dominic, citing intimidation. The judge agreed, signing it on the spot. She also upheld the asset freeze, ordering restitution for my tuition within 6 months. Dominic's lawyer, cornered by the evidence, accepted a deal 60% of frozen funds to clear the debt, with a paper trail for authorities to track. Dominic nodded curtly, his confidence gone under the courtroom lights. As we left, Brenda grabbed my arm in the hallway. "Alexis, we didn't mean to hurt you," she pleaded. I pulled away, my voice low. "You chose your bets over me." Travis stepped in, guiding me out. Whitney, waiting outside, hugged me tightly, her school backpack still on. I blocked Mom's number that afternoon, done with her excuses. Dad sent one text, apologizing vaguely, but I deleted it without replying. Donna met me at her University of Texas office later, finalizing the emergency aid. "The court order clinches it. You'll get full coverage for this semester and a payment plan for next," she said, handing me signed forms. The weight of financial ruin lifted slightly, but the betrayal still stung. Travis filed the civil suit paperwork that evening, ensuring Mom and Dad faced legal consequences beyond the freeze. Back at Casey's apartment, we reviewed the day. Whitney shared how Mom's job at a local accounting firm was on the line. Her boss had caught wind of the court case through Austin's tight-knit professional circles. Gossip spread fast, and Brenda's reputation was crumbling. Dad, meanwhile, had moved to a motel across town, his marriage unraveling under the strain. Travis confirmed it through a mutual friend. Randall was looking for new work. Unable to face neighbors who'd heard the news, Keith called with an update. Dominic's operation was collapsing. His arrest came that night during a routine traffic stop, where police found incriminating documents tying him to other shady deals. "Your recordings tipped the scale," Keith said. The lender's network was scattering, too scared to target us further. Whitney overheard Mom crying about losing her savings to cover legal fees, her world shrinking as consequences hit. Casey made coffee, her steady presence grounding us. Travis drafted a plan to keep Whitney safe, suggesting she stay with us until things settled. I nodded, grateful for her courage in handing me that notebook. The courtroom victory felt real, but it wasn't joy, it was clarity. Mom and Dad had made their choices, and I wasn't their fallback anymore. As we sorted the last of the evidence, I felt the ground shift beneath me, solidifying a path I'd forge without them. Over the next few months, life moved on. I threw myself into my routine at the University of Texas, attending art lectures and sketching in the campus studios. The emergency aid from Donna kicked in fully, covering my fees and leaving room for a part-time gig at the student gallery. I sorted exhibits during shifts, handling canvases and frames that reminded me of the creativity I'd almost lost. Grades came back strong. My portfolio professor praised a series on fractured families, calling it raw and compelling. I avoided home entirely, crashing at friends' places or the dorm when needed. Travis landed a senior role at a tech firm in North Austin, his experience turning the family's mess into a strength during interviews. He texted updates about his new office, complete with views of the hills. Whitney moved in with him after school let out, her room set up with posters and books. She enrolled in summer classes at a local community college, focusing on graphic design. "No more secrets," she said during our weekly lunches at a taco stand near campus. We blocked Mom and Dad's numbers together, deleting old messages without a second thought. Casey became a regular fixture, helping Whitney adjust and cooking meals that filled the apartment with warmth. She connected me with a counselor through her work's employee program, sessions that unpacked the anger I'd buried. "You're rebuilding from scratch," the counselor noted, and it rang true. I joined a hiking group on weekends, trekking trails around Ladybird Lake, the exercise clearing my head. Friends from class invited me to gallery openings, where I networked without the shadow of family debts. Word trickled in about mom and dad through distant relatives. Brenda's accounting job vanished when her boss discovered the court records public filings in Texas don't stay hidden long. She faced collections calls daily, her credit ruined from the unfrozen debts she couldn't pay. The house in the suburb went into foreclosure, listed for sale at a loss after the lenders circled back. Neighbors whispered about the scandal, and her social circle dried up. She ended up in a small apartment on the city's edge, scraping by on odd jobs while attending mandatory addiction meetings ordered by the probation office. Dad fared no better. Randall filed for divorce quietly, citing irreconcilable differences tied to the financial ruin. He moved to a rundown motel in South Austin, taking a demotion at his office to avoid the gossip. Mutual friends cut ties, leaving him isolated. Whitney got one last call from him, begging for contact. But she hung up and blocked him too. "They chose this," Travis said when we discussed it over coffee. The lender's fallout hit Dominic hardest. His arrest led to a plea deal, but his assets were seized, scattering his network. I graduated to full independence, paying my own bills with gallery earnings and aid refunds. Travis and I opened a joint savings account at a new bank, depositing small amounts monthly, no more family funds at risk. Whitney thrived, her designs winning a school contest. We celebrated with a quiet dinner at a food truck park, toasting to fresh starts. Casey proposed to Travis soon after, their engagement a bright spot amid the wreckage. Looking back, the betrayal forged something unbreakable in me. I learned to spot red flags early, trusting my instincts over blood ties. The notebook that started it all sat in a safe deposit box, a reminder of what I'd overcome. Mom tried reaching out once through a cousin, but I declined, focusing on my path forward. Dad faded into silence, his choices sealing his isolation. In the end, cutting them out wasn't revenge, it was survival. I built a life free from their chaos, stronger for the scars. If there's one lesson from this nightmare, it's this: protect your future fiercely. And don't let family drag you into their abyss. Independence isn't just freedom, it's the key to rising above.
"You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, staring at the bank statement in my hands. The name of the account leaped off the page: Hopeful Hearts Foundation. At first glance, it looked legitimate. A charity name, regular transfers from our joint savings account, and an unassuming address. But I knew better. There was no Hopeful Hearts Foundation, and the steady stream of withdrawals lined up far too neatly with Michael's late-night business meetings and unexplained expenses. I felt the blood drain from my face as I sat at the kitchen table, the evidence of his betrayal spreading out before me. My name is Lillian, and for 10 years I thought I knew the man I'd married. Michael was charming, successful, and quick to flash a reassuring smile whenever life threw challenges our way. He was the kind of man who could talk his way out of anything, and for years I believed every word. But now, staring at this bank statement, it was impossible to ignore the truth. Michael wasn't just funneling money out of our savings, he was using it to fund his mistress under the guise of a fake charity. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop and started digging deeper. I traced the transactions, each one leading to the same account. I Googled the charity name, hoping I'd find something, anything, that would prove my suspicions wrong. Nothing. No website, no social media presence, no history. I clicked on the address listed on the bank statement. It led to a generic office building in the city, one I knew Michael had no reason to visit. My heart sank. This wasn't just a hunch anymore. It was fact. Michael walked into the kitchen an hour later, whistling to himself as he dropped his briefcase on the counter. "Hey, babe," he said, leaning down to kiss me. How was your day? I forced a smile, slipping the bank statement under a pile of mail. Fine, just going through some bills. Anything interesting? He asked, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. Nope, same old stuff, I said casually, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. He nodded, oblivious, and walked out of the room. As soon as he was gone, I exhaled shakily, clutching the edge of the table to steady myself. This wasn't the time to confront him, not yet. Michael was smart, but he'd grown careless enough to leave a trail. And if I was going to handle this, I needed to be smarter. Sitting back down, I opened a fresh notebook and started taking notes. Dates, amounts, patterns, it all went into my makeshift ledger. I didn't know what my next move was yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Michael wasn't getting away with this. He thought he was untouchable. That was his first mistake. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Michael slept soundly beside me, completely unaware that the delicate balance of our life together had been shattered. I replayed every suspicious moment in my head, the last-minute business trips, the late-night phone calls he took in the garage, and the vague explanations that never quite added up. For years, I'd dismissed my unease, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. Now I had proof. The next morning, after Michael left for work, I grabbed my laptop and dove deeper into the trail he'd left behind. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. Not only had he funneled tens of thousands of dollars into this charity, but he'd also used it to pay for luxury items, flights, and hotel stays. One invoice stood out, a receipt for a diamond necklace, delivered to an address I didn't recognize. My stomach churned as I Googled the address. It was a high-end apartment complex across town. It didn't take long to confirm what I already suspected. The apartment belonged to Rebecca, the woman I'd once overheard Michael refer to as just a colleague. I clenched my fists, the betrayal cutting deeper with every new discovery. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the lies, the manipulation, the audacity to use our hard-earned savings to support his mistress. I called my best friend Amanda later that day. She'd always been the level-headed one, the person I turned to when life felt overwhelming. "You're not seriously thinking of letting this slide, are you?" she asked after I explained everything. "Of course not," I said, pacing the living room. "But I can't just confront him. He'll deny it, twist the story, make me out to be the villain. I need something stronger, something he can't talk his way out of." Amanda was quiet for a moment. "What about the authorities? Couldn't you report him for fraud or embezzlement?" Her suggestion planted a seed. "Maybe," I said slowly, "but I need to gather more evidence first. If I'm going to do this, I need to make sure there's no way he can escape the consequences." Over the next week, I became a woman on a mission. I printed every bank statement, copied every transaction, and compiled a file so airtight that not even Michael could poke holes in it. I even reached out to an investigator I found online, someone who specialized in financial fraud. The investigator, Detective Carter, agreed to meet with me the following week. "If what you're saying is true," he said over the phone, "we can definitely build a case. But I'll need concrete evidence to move forward." "You'll have it," I replied, my voice steady. For the first time since discovering Michael's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of control. He thought he was clever, but he hadn't counted on me fighting back. By the time I met with Detective Carter, my file was a meticulously organized masterpiece. Every transfer, every purchase, every link to Michael's so-called charity was documented in painstaking detail. We met at a small cafe on the other side of town, a deliberate choice to ensure Michael wouldn't suspect anything. Carter was a no-nonsense man in his 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "This is solid," he said, flipping through the pages of my file. "You've done most of the work for me." "I had to," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. "Michael is careful. He knows how to cover his tracks. But I've been keeping this to myself for weeks, and I need to know it's going to lead somewhere." Carter nodded. "It will." With this much evidence, we can launch an investigation into the charity account. If it's as fraudulent as it looks, the bank will freeze it and will move forward with charges. The weight on my chest began to lift, but I wasn't ready to feel relief just yet. What happens next? I'll file the paperwork to initiate a formal inquiry, he said. But if you want to take this one step further, we can set up a sting. Let him think he's in the clear, and then catch him in the act. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. You mean wait until he tries to withdraw money? Exactly, Carter said, his tone matter of fact. We'll track the account, monitor his activity, and coordinate with the bank. When he makes his move, we'll be there. That night, I sat in the darkened living room going over everything Carter had said. The idea of letting Michael dig his own grave was tempting, but it also meant playing the part of the oblivious wife for a little while longer. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew it was the only way to ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. The next morning, I transferred $50,000 into the charity account. It was money I'd been saving in a separate, secret account for emergencies. Money Michael didn't even know existed. But I marked it clearly in the bank's system. Donations under investigation. Michael didn't suspect a thing. Over the next few days, he was unusually chipper, humming to himself as he pored over his phone and dropped hints about big plans. I smiled when appropriate, laughed at his jokes, and played the role of the supportive wife. Inside, I was counting down the days until the trap was set. He had no idea what was coming. The days that followed felt like a test of endurance. Each morning, Michael would waltz into the kitchen with an extra spring in his step, checking his phone obsessively while muttering things like, "Just a little longer, and everything will fall into place." I'd smile from behind my coffee mug, pretending to share in his excitement. Little did he know, the place everything was falling into was a holding cell. Detective Carter kept me updated on the investigation. The bank had flagged the account and placed it under close scrutiny. Every transaction, every login, every transfer was now under a microscope. "He's getting reckless," Carter said during one of our calls. "The patterns are clear. He's making plans for a big withdrawal." "How soon do you think he'll try?" I asked, pacing my office. "Within the next week," Carter replied. "When he does, we'll have everything ready. Are you prepared for what comes next?" His question hung in the air. Was I ready? For weeks, I'd been steeling myself for this moment, but now that it was so close, doubt crept in. "Yes," I said firmly, brushing away the hesitation. "I'm ready." That weekend, Michael announced he'd be leaving early Monday morning for a work trip. He made a show of packing his bag, throwing in suits and ties as though he were heading to an important conference. "Another business deal?" I asked casually, folding laundry nearby. "Something like that," he said with a grin. "Big opportunities on the horizon. Don't wait up for me. I'll probably be gone all day." I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. The night before his trip, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of Michael's breathing beside me. Part of me wanted to shake him awake, to confront him right then and there. But I couldn't. I'd come too far to let emotions ruin the plan. Instead, I silently rehearsed every step of what would happen the next day. Carter had assured me that the authorities would move swiftly, intercepting Michael at the bank the moment he attempted to withdraw the money, and I would be there to witness it. When morning finally came, Michael kissed me on the cheek as he left, his usual smugness practically radiating off him. "Wish me luck," he said, grabbing his bag. "Good luck," I replied, my voice steady. "I hope everything works out exactly the way you want it to." It wasn't a lie, after all. As soon as Michael's car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my bag and left the house. My heart pounded as I drove to the bank, adrenaline surging with every mile. When I arrived, Detective Carter was already there, standing near the entrance with a small team of plainclothes officers. He gave me a curt nod as I approached. "He hasn't shown up yet," Carter said. "But we've confirmed his withdrawal appointment. He'll be here soon." I glanced at the bustling street around us, my stomach churning. And you're sure this will work? He won't have time to slip away? Carter's expression was calm but resolute. As soon as he tries to access the account, the bank will alert us. He won't get far. I stepped back from the entrance, positioning myself just out of sight. From my vantage point, I could see the doors clearly without being noticed. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, Michael's car pulled into the parking lot. He stepped out, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, looking every bit the successful businessman he liked to portray. My hands tightened into fists as I watched him stroll into the bank, exuding confidence. Inside, the scene unfolded just as Carter had predicted. Michael approached the counter, handed over his information, and waited as the teller accessed the flagged account. Through the glass doors, I saw the moment the teller paused, glancing nervously at a nearby manager. Michael's confident demeanor faltered slightly, but he masked it with a charming smile, leaning casually on the counter as if nothing was wrong. Then the bank manager approached, followed closely by two plainclothes officers. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I saw Michael's face twist in confusion, then indignation. Seconds later, the officers produced their badges and handcuffed him. His protests were muffled by the thick glass, but his body language told the whole story: shock, denial, and finally, panic. I stepped out of the shadows, standing just beyond the bank's entrance as they escorted him outside. When his eyes met mine, his expression morphed into something I'd never seen before: raw fear. "Lillian?" he sputtered, his voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I pulled a folder from my bag, the divorce papers I'd prepared weeks ago, and handed them to him as the officers led him past me. "Consider this my last donation," I said, my tone icy. His mouth opened to protest, but the officers ushered him into a waiting car before he could say another word. As the car drove away, Carter approached me. "That was clean," he said. "He's not going anywhere for a long time." I nodded, exhaling a shaky breath. For the first time in weeks, the weight on my chest began to lift. It was over. The drive home felt surreal. The morning's events played on a loop in my mind. The officers snapping handcuffs on Michael, the shock in his eyes when he realized I'd been one step ahead all along. I should have felt triumphant, but all I could manage was a mix of exhaustion and relief. The adrenaline that had fueled me for weeks was finally starting to wear off, leaving behind a quiet emptiness. When I pulled into the driveway, Amanda was waiting for me. She'd insisted on coming over to help celebrate, though she knew me well enough to bring a bottle of wine instead of balloons. "Did it go as planned?" she asked as I stepped out of the car. I nodded, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "He's in custody. They got him the moment he tried to access the account." Her eyes widened. "And did you—" I held up my empty folder, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "Delivered the divorce papers personally." Amanda let out a low whistle. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." Inside, we sat at the kitchen table, the wine poured and the silence heavy. Amanda finally broke it. "So, what now?" I swirled the wine in my glass, staring into its deep red depths. "Now I figure out what comes next. The house, the finances, everything's in limbo until the legal process is done. But at least I don't have to pretend anymore." She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "You know, you handled this better than most people would have. You didn't just sit back and let him walk all over you." I shrugged, feeling the weight of her words. I didn't have a choice. He didn't just betray me. He used our future to fund his lies. I couldn't let him get away with that. As the day wore on, the reality of my new life began to sink in. Michael was gone, his sham of a charity exposed, and the financial mess he'd created would soon be sorted through. There was still so much to do: meetings with lawyers, statements for the authorities, but for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. I stood by the window that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Amanda had left hours ago, and the house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. This house had once been a symbol of the life Michael and I were building together. Now it felt like a monument to his lies. But it was mine now, and I would rebuild it on my own terms. The day after Michael's arrest, the calls started pouring in. Lawyers, investigators, even family members who'd heard the news and wanted the real story. I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, scribbling notes as I spoke with Detective Carter. "The charges against him are solid," he explained. "Fraud, embezzlement, and falsifying charity documents. He'll face serious jail time, especially with the evidence you provided." "What about the money he took?" I asked, tapping my pen against the notepad. "The funds are frozen for now," Carter replied. "Once the investigation is complete, we'll work to recover what's left. As for the assets he purchased, those will likely be seized as part of the case." I nodded, a sense of satisfaction settling over me. For the first time, it felt like there was a clear path forward. Later that afternoon, I met with my lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Clara who wasted no time getting to the point. "With the divorce papers served and his arrest on record, the proceedings should be straightforward," Clara said, flipping through a thick folder of documents. "You'll have a strong case for securing the house and protecting your remaining assets." "And the joint savings?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "That's trickier," Clara admitted. "Depending on how much he's squandered, there may not be much to split. But given the circumstances, I'll push for you to retain the lion's share." I nodded, bracing myself for the financial fallout. "I just want this over with." "It will be," Clara assured me, her tone firm. "You've taken the hardest steps already. The rest is just paperwork." Over the next few days, I focused on untangling my life from Michael's. I contacted the bank to update my accounts, scheduled consultations with financial advisors, and started sorting through the mess he'd left behind. It was exhausting, but with every task I completed, I felt a little lighter. Amanda stopped by one evening with takeout and a bottle of wine. "You're looking better," she said, handing me a plate of lo mein. "Like you've finally gotten some sleep." "Barely," I said with a laugh, sinking into the couch beside her. "But it feels good to be doing something, you know. For so long I felt stuck, like I was just going through the motions. Now I feel free." She raised her glass in a toast. "To freedom, then." I clinked my glass against hers, a smile breaking across my face. To freedom. As the days turned into weeks, I began to see the pieces of my life coming together. The legal proceedings were underway. The investigation into Michael's fraud continued, and I was slowly reclaiming my independence. One evening, I found myself standing in the living room, staring at a bare patch on the wall where Michael's prized painting used to hang. It had been seized as part of the investigation, and in its absence, the space felt brighter, lighter. I smiled, realizing that the emptiness wasn't a void. It was a clean slate, and I was ready to fill it with something better. A month after Michael's arrest, I stood in the living room, surrounded by boxes. The house felt different now, quieter, lighter, almost like it was holding its breath, waiting for its next chapter. I was packing up the last remnants of his presence, ties, cufflinks, and the stack of notebooks he always claimed held his brilliant ideas. Most of it was evidence now, boxed and labeled for investigators. There was a strange satisfaction in watching it all disappear. Each item that left the house felt like a weight being lifted, a small step closer to reclaiming the space as my own. The legal proceedings were progressing smoothly, thanks to Clara's no-nonsense approach. She called one morning with an update. "The judge is leaning in your favor," she said. "Given the circumstances, you're likely to retain full ownership of the house and any remaining savings." I leaned back in my chair, relief washing over me. "That's good news," I said, though the reality still felt surreal. "There's also talk of restitution," Clara added. "If the court finds him guilty on all charges, he could be ordered to pay back some of what he took." I raised an eyebrow. "From where? His fake charity account?" She chuckled. Point taken. But it's a symbolic victory if nothing else. As I worked through the legal and financial logistics, I also started thinking about my next steps. For years, I'd poured my energy into supporting Michael and his ambitions, often at the expense of my own goals. Now, with him out of the picture, I had the freedom to focus on myself. Amanda was the first to suggest I take some time away. "You've been through hell, Lillian," she said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine. "You deserve a break, somewhere sunny with no reminders of Michael or his nonsense." The idea was tempting, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to leave just yet. "I feel like there's still so much to do here," I said, gesturing to the stack of paperwork on the table. "You've done more than enough," Amanda insisted. "The house, the finances, the legal stuff, it's all under control. Take a week, recharge, and come back ready to tackle whatever's next." She had a point. The next morning, I booked a flight to the coast. It wasn't a grand vacation, just a small getaway to clear my head and figure out what I wanted my future to look like. As I packed my bag, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. For so long, my life had revolved around Michael, his needs, his plans, his betrayals. Now, for the first time, I was making decisions purely for myself, and it felt incredible. When the plane took off, I looked out the window, watching the city shrink beneath me. It was a moment of quiet clarity, a reminder that the past didn't define me, and the future was mine to shape. The trip to the coast was exactly what I needed. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of Michael's lies pressing down on me. I spent my mornings walking along the beach, the salty breeze clearing my mind, and my afternoons reading novels I'd never had time for. By the third day, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Michael's betrayal had taken so much from me: time, trust, a sense of security. But it hadn't taken me. I was still here, still standing, and for the first time, I realized just how strong I was. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I sat on the deck of my rental cottage with a notebook in hand. I'd always been the planner in the relationship, the one who mapped out budgets, vacations, and future goals. But now, the blank page in front of me wasn't for anyone else. It was for me. At the top, I wrote, "What's next?" The list came quickly, almost effortlessly. Redecorate the house, make it mine, reconnect with friends, build the relationships I'd neglected during my marriage, pursue my career, invest in myself, forgive myself, let go of the guilt for trusting someone who didn't deserve it. By the time I set the pen down, the page was full, and for the first time in months, I felt hopeful. When I returned home, the house felt different. It wasn't just the absence of Michael's things, it was the absence of him, his presence, his lies, his shadow over everything. I started small, rearranging furniture and swapping out the art on the walls. Each change felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I also began reaching out to old friends, people I'd drifted away from during the chaos of my marriage. Their support was overwhelming, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this new chapter. One afternoon, as I was clearing out the garage, I found a box labeled "Keepsakes." Inside were photos, cards, and mementos from the early days of my relationship with Michael. For a moment, I considered tossing it all into the trash, but instead, I set it aside. Those memories were part of my story, even if they belonged to a chapter I was ready to close. I didn't need to erase the past to move forward. I just needed to own it and let it go. The months that followed were a period of quiet rebuilding. I threw myself into reclaiming my life, one small victory at a time. The house, once a reminder of Michael's betrayal, began to feel like my own. I painted the walls in colors that brought me joy, replaced the furniture with pieces I loved, and turned his old office into a library filled with books I'd always wanted to read. Friends and family noticed the change, not just in the house, but in me. "You seem lighter," Amanda said during one of her visits. "Like you finally let go of all the weight you were carrying." I think I have, I replied with a smile. It's amazing what happens when you stop living for someone else. Professionally, I began pursuing opportunities I'd put on hold during my marriage. Michael had always dismissed my ambitions, telling me I was better suited to supporting his vision. Now I was free to build my own. I reached out to a former colleague who connected me with a consulting project. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start, and it reminded me of what I was capable of. One evening, as I reviewed a client proposal at the kitchen table, I felt a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. This was mine, not something I'd done for Michael, but something I'd built for myself. Meanwhile, the legal process with Michael moved steadily forward. Clara kept me updated, and each new development felt like another step toward closure. The day the divorce was finalized, I celebrated with Amanda over dinner. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To never settling again," I added, clinking mine against hers. A few weeks later, I received a letter from the court regarding the restitution case. Michael had been ordered to repay a portion of the stolen funds, money I knew I'd likely never see, but it was a symbolic victory nonetheless. I tucked the letter into a file, feeling a sense of finality. Michael's chapter in my life was officially closed. That evening, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset through the newly cleaned windows. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like home. For so long, I'd defined myself by what I'd lost: trust, security, love. But now I was learning to define myself by what I'd gained: strength, independence, and the knowledge that I could rebuild, no matter how much had been taken from me. As the last rays of sunlight faded, I opened my notebook and flipped to the list I'd made months ago. Most of the items were checked off, but there was one I still needed to work on: forgive myself. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace. That was a work in progress. But for the first time, I felt ready to take it on.